What if the man with the greatest wisdom was also the one who made the greatest mistakes? We know his name, Solomon, the son of David, the builder of the temple, the man who spoke with God in dreams, who ruled in peace, and whose wealth made silver seem worthless. But behind the gold, behind the splendor, lies a shadow. This was no perfect king. He was wise, yes, wiser than any before or after. But he was also a man torn in two, a king who knew what was right and still did what was wrong. So what happened? How did the wisest man on earth fall so far from heaven? This is the story of the rise and fall of King Solomon, a man blessed beyond measure, and yet cursed by the very things he once prayed for. Let's go back to where it all began. Solomon's story doesn't begin with a crown. It begins with a scandal. His father, King David, the man after God's own heart, fell into one of the darkest chapters of his life. He saw a woman bathing on a rooftop. Her name was Bathsheba. She was married. But David wanted her. And what David wanted, he took. The affair led to lies, and eventually, murder. Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, was sent to die on the battlefield. And the child born from that affair? He died too. It was a shameful moment in Israel's royal history, a stain on the throne. But out of that brokenness, something unexpected happened. David repented, and God, in his mercy, allowed Bathsheba to bear another son. His name was Solomon. He was not the firstborn, not the strongest, not the most obvious choice for king. David had other sons, Amnon, the eldest, but he was killed in a bitter family feud. Absalom, charismatic and bold, tried to take the throne by force and died hanging from a tree. Adonijah, another son, even threw himself a coronation party while David was on his deathbed. But none of them were chosen. God had his eye on Solomon, not because of lineage, but because of purpose. And Bathsheba, once the subject of scandal, became the mother of promise. She entered David's chambers in his final days, reminding him of the oath he had made, that Solomon, her son, would reign. And David, old, weak, but still king, responded. He ordered Solomon to ride on his own royal mule. He had him anointed by the priest, and just like that, while Adonijah celebrated with nobles and wine, a trumpet sounded from Zion. Long live King Solomon! The throne was secure, but it wasn't safe. One by one, Solomon had to eliminate threats. Adonijah begged for mercy, and for a time, he was spared. But when he later made a move for power again, Solomon struck. Joab, David's general, was loyal once, but had blood on his hands. Shimei had cursed David publicly during his flight from Absalom. David's last instructions were clear. Do not let their gray heads go down to the grave in peace. And Solomon obeyed. It was ruthless. It was political. It was necessary. He had wisdom even then, not the divine kind yet, but the sharp, cold wisdom of kingship. Peace sometimes begins with blood. And then came the dream. He went to Gibeon, offered 1,000 burnt offerings, and in the quiet of the night, God came. Not in thunder, not in fire, but in a question. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Solomon, still young, still unsure, could have asked for anything. Riches, victory over enemies, long life. But he didn't. He looked at the people, so numerous, so vast. He looked at the throne, heavy with expectation, and he said, Give your servant a discerning heart, to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? It pleased God, so much so that he not only granted Solomon wisdom like no man before or after, but also gave him what he hadn't asked for: riches, honor, glory, peace. In a single night, a boy became more than a king. He became the wisest man who ever lived. But wisdom, as we'll soon see, is not always enough. With wisdom came favor, and with favor came a kingdom like the world had never seen. Solomon didn't rule with the sword, he ruled with the mind. While his father David had spilled blood in battle, Solomon forged alliances in marble halls. He married into powerful families, signed trade deals, and opened the gates of Israel to the nations. From Egypt to Tyre, from Arabia to the distant isles, wealth poured into Jerusalem like a river of gold. Silver became so common, it was no longer treasured. Cedar from Lebanon lined his palaces. Peacocks and apes were imported from far-off lands. The city glistened under the sun, the crown jewel of the ancient world. But Solomon's greatest project wasn't a palace, it was a temple. For years, David had dreamed of building a house for God. But God had told him no. He was a man of war. The honor would go to his son. And so, in the 4th year of his reign, Solomon began the work. He gathered the finest materials, gold from Ophir, marble from the quarries, and craftsmen from across the empire. 7 years it took. Every detail was precise. Every cubit mattered. The inner sanctuary was overlaid with pure gold. Cherubim with wings outstretched guarded the Ark of the Covenant, and when it was finished, they brought the Ark into the Holy of Holies. And as the priests withdrew, a cloud descended. The glory of the Lord filled the temple, so thick the priests could not stand to minister. It was a moment of awe, a reminder that, despite all the splendor, this was still God's house. Solomon stood before the people. He lifted his hands toward heaven and prayed, "The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built? Hear from heaven your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive." It was not just ceremony, it was covenant. And God responded, not with fire or voice, but with a quiet promise. "If you walk before me faithfully, I will establish your throne forever. But if you or your descendants turn away, this temple will become a heap of ruins." It was a moment of glory, shadowed by a warning. But Solomon wasn't just admired by his own people. His fame spread across the world. And then, she came. The Queen of Sheba. She traveled from the ends of the earth, bringing camels loaded with spices, gold, and precious stones, not for tribute, but for truth. She came to test him with riddles, to see if the stories were real, and when she saw it, the wisdom in his words, the splendor of his court, the offerings, the servants, even the way his table was set, she was left breathless. "The reports I heard did not even come close," she said. "How happy your people must be. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel." It was perhaps the highest moment in Solomon's reign. A king praised not just for his riches, but for his wisdom and his God. The golden age of Israel had arrived. But golden ages do not last forever. Even as Solomon stood atop the world, a quiet shift began deep within. The wisdom remained, but something else began to change. For all his wisdom, Solomon forgot the simplest truth. The heart is not conquered by knowledge. It is kept by obedience. At first his choices seemed harmless. A marriage here, a treaty there, political alliances sealed with wedding vows. It was how kings did business in the ancient world. But Solomon took it further. 700 wives, 300 concubines, and many of them, foreign princesses, worshipped foreign gods: Chemosh, Molech, Ashtoreth, Baal. God had warned Israel, "Do not intermarry with them, for they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." But Solomon loved them anyway, not all at once, not in rebellion, but slowly, quietly, compromise by compromise, First, he allowed his wives to worship their gods in private. Then, he tolerated shrines being built on the hills outside Jerusalem. And finally, the unthinkable, Solomon himself bowed. The man who once built the temple of the Lord now built altars to idols. Not out of conviction, but out of convenience, to keep the peace at home, to avoid conflict, to satisfy his own heart. And the Lord was not silent. God appeared to Solomon a second time, just as he had before. But this time there was no promise, only warning. Since you have not kept my covenant, I will tear the kingdom away from you, not during your lifetime, for the sake of David, but in the days of your son. 10 tribes will be given to another. It was a judgment wrapped in mercy and in heartbreak. And then came the adversaries, Hadad the Edomite, Rezin of Damascus. And worst of all, Jeroboam, a servant in Solomon's court, chosen by God to lead the 10 northern tribes. The peace Solomon had preserved began to crack. Whispers of rebellion stirred in the corners of his kingdom. And Solomon, once the golden boy of Israel, grew old, restless, disillusioned. What does a man do when he has everything, but knows he's lost what mattered most? He writes, in his final days, Solomon turns inward, and from the ashes of regret, he pens a book, Ecclesiastes, a king looking back, a man who tasted every pleasure, built every project, gained every treasure, and found it all empty. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. Solomon had wisdom, but it didn't save him. He had wealth, but it didn't satisfy him. He had women, palaces, music, gardens, power, but it was all like chasing the wind. And at the end, only one thing remained. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't grand, it was simple. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, died with a broken heart, but perhaps a humbled one. And when he died, his son Rehoboam took the throne. A proud young man, unwilling to listen. He taxed the people harshly, mocked the elders. And within days, the kingdom split in 2. 10 tribes broke away, just as God had foretold. The empire Solomon built in gold, shattered like clay. His legacy was now a tale of 2 kings, one wise, one foolish, but both in the same man. Solomon's story is not just about a king, it's about us. How many times have we known what's right, but chosen what's easy? How often have we asked God for wisdom, only to ignore it when our desires whisper louder? Solomon had the wisdom of heaven, but his downfall came not from ignorance, but from a divided heart. And maybe that's the greatest warning of all, because wisdom alone won't save you. Success can't sustain you, and even the brightest crown can crack in silence. But even in failure, even in regret, God is not finished. Solomon's final words still echo today. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Not just for kings, not just for the ancient world, but for you, here, now, listening. So ask yourself, where is your heart turning? What small compromise have you let into your life? What idols are being built on the hills of your soul? The story of Solomon is not here to shame you. It's here to wake you up. Before wisdom fades, before glory turns to dust. If this story stirred something in you, take a moment to reflect, to pray, or just to pause. And if you want to hear more stories like this, of kings and prophets, of light and darkness, of God moving through history, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, and explore the mysteries that still speak from ancient pages. This was the story of Solomon, the wisest king, the most foolish king. and the man who still speaks through silence. We'll see you in the next story.